Hi, my name is ZaKaiRan, and welcome to another one of my outrageously amazing, insanely enlightening master keys of creation about how to be the unlimited source master of divine creation that you truly are, to create the joy, love, well-being, and abundance you desire. You'll find tons of more self-empowering goodies to help you become a conscious, deliberate, empowered creator of reality and have tons more fun in your life on my website at ZaKaiRan.com. All right, so here we go. How to teach in the most fun and efficient ways. Teach with praise, encouragement, fun, love, and recommendation, rather than do not do this, do not judge, criticize, punish, demand, and control. That is not education, that is fascism. So the Latin root of the word educate is educare, which means to lead out, to rear, or nourish. And similarly, educare means to bring out and draw forth. Two seemingly conflicting philosophies of education, educare leaning more towards training or programming through repetition, whereas educare, educere, leans more towards cultivation or drawing out the latent potential and innate abilities that are already present within the learner. Educare implies that all students are basically stupid and have no ability whatsoever to guide themselves and need to be taught or programmed how to think and what to do, which is basically the educational system we have today, unless you're in a more alternative education, whereas educare implies that all students have potential knowledge, abilities, and talents within themselves that just need to be nourished and encouraged for them to bloom like beautiful flowers. And of course, the more alternative educational systems lean towards that. And of course, you can imagine which perspective I am in favor of and which I am not. So there is nothing worse than criticism, judgment, and coercion using the thread of bad grades or punishment. They just feel terrible to the teacher, feel terrible to the student. Yet those methods have been used as tools to manipulate, control, and supposedly educate children and even adult students for millennia. They've especially been used to force children and adults to do things they really don't want to do, supposedly for their own good. Of course, this same pattern of control through judgment, fear of punishment, and being fired is extended into adult life in the workplace to force workers to do things that they really don't want to do. But teaching, in quotation marks, by controlling behavior using criticism, judgment, demands, and fear of punishment is not only a barbaric and inhumane way to try and educate children and of course adults, it is also inefficient, no fun, and ultimately creates fear-oriented adults and criminals who just want to resist authority figures that were telling them how to think and what to do and trying to take away their freedoms, and who just want to resist being programmed, who ultimately want their own freedom to think, believe, and do as they please. Hence why I was always getting in trouble, because I was always resisting authority as a student, as a child, and even later as a young adult. Because life is about freedom. And of course, we are all free. Teaching and controlling with fear is a great way to create a subservient peasant workforce who also are willing to risk their lives and throw their lives away as soldiers in aristocratic wars, but it does not create empowered, happy, and prosperous people, because an empowered person is one who is happy to do the job or the work assigned to them. A happy person is one who feels free to express themselves, including their unique perspectives as well as their creativity, things not typically encouraged in classical educational systems and the workplace. Luckily, that old barbaric way of trying to quote unquote educate, control, and program children and adults is slowly, I emphasize slowly, drifting away, especially in more alternative educational systems where it's thriving. And many companies have adopted a much more holistic approach in the workplace where employees are granted much greater levels of freedom because they understand that a happy worker is a flourishing and good worker. And those companies are seeing the benefits of this financially because people actually want to do the work that they're assigned because they're working in a more uplifting, more creative rather than oppressive environment. And so there are less people taking sick leaves when they're not actually sick. So that was the old aristocratic, control the masses and police the peasants' behavior type of mentality that has been the status quo for the last 5,000 plus years. But we are entering a new age, and eventually our educational systems will evolve beyond that fear-based control system. So how will we educate our children and adults in the future? Well, it will be done exactly how dogs are trained. Yes, that's correct. In today's enlightened age, with praise and reward rather than punishment. It's much more efficient to train your dog with treats than bashing it on the head with a newspaper. So basically, the animal educational system has evolved faster than the human educational system. Our dog trainers and animal trainers far surpass the human educational system. It evolved quicker because it became obvious to animal trainers that it was a lot more efficient and a lot more fun and nice for the trainer as well as the animal, and creates happy, obedient, happy to please animals using reward, support, encouragement, and love rather than training using fear, aggression, and punishment. The ultimate holistic, supportive, loving, empowering way to educate is with praise, encouragement, love, reward, and recommendation, not judgment and criticism and demands and control and fear of punishment, or simply put, the same as creating anything you desire. You emphasize the positive, wanted behavior and de-emphasize the negative, unwanted behavior. And of course, I didn't talk about it, but we can apply this to the prison systems as well. Prison systems are an absolute failure because all we do is punish. And then of course all the prisoners just want to say, fuck you, I want to do what I want, because that's what we all want. We all want to do what we want. We want to be free. So, really, the best way to do anything is you praise and reward positive, wanted behavior and completely disregard negative, unwanted behavior. You do not punish bad behavior. You instead give it no energy and no focus and no attention at all. That's how we will educate, and that's how our prison systems will be in the future. Which, of course, is difficult because negative, unwanted behavior is so in your face and demanding your attention. Hence why we throw prisoners in prisons. We just want to get them out of our fucking faces. But nevertheless, that is the work. That is the holistic, empowering, creative path of mastery. That is the more holistic way of empowering others. A holistic teacher also never makes demands, only recommendations. If you were to say something, I recommend that you do this if you want to. If you want to learn about this. If you want to learn about this subject, well, then I recommend reading that or studying that. But if it does not interest you, well, then you, of course, have the complete freedom to completely disregard my recommendation and do something else that does interest you. This is the approach of the Sudbury schools in the United States, a holistic approach that will eventually be the norm when society has evolved considerably further, while children are not forced to do anything that they don't want to do. If a student just wants to go fishing every day or play video games all day, they are allowed to do that. And when a student expresses an interest, finally, in mathematics or music or science, etc., then they are taught those subjects. But if they don't express an interest in a certain subject, well, then nothing is forced upon them. Freedom of expression and freedom of interest is encouraged rather than oppressed and discouraged like the educational system of the barbaric age, which we tend to still be in. But until all children are in Sudbury schools and similar kind of schools, the best approach is, as the classic Bing Crosby song goes, you got to accentuate the positive, eliminate the negative, latch on to the affirmative, and don't mess with Mr. In Between. You got to spread joy up to the maximum, bring gloom down to the minimum, otherwise pandemonium. And of course, that's what we have had on planet Earth, panda-fucking-monium for millennium, because we're punishing our children and punishing our adults and punishing each other rather than nurturing and loving and encouraging each other. And this classic Bing Crosby song from 1945, at the very end of World War II, could not be more poignant or more on the money about not only how to educate, but how to create anything you desire. And more importantly, how to be happy every day. And as a teacher, guide, boss, mentor, parent, or friend, you should follow Bing's advice to the letter and accentuate the positive, uplifting, supportive, happy, caring, generous behavior, and unique creative work. You want to accentuate uplifting, supportive, happy, caring, generous behavior, and unique creative work, and pay no attention to unwanted negative behavior or lack of effort, laziness. In other words, don't reward negative behavior with your negative affirmations, with your criticism and judgment and negative attention, because that emphasizes the negative, not the positive, which just attracts more negative behavior. You know, you bashing your employee or your student or your child and not encouraging them just encourages them to just resist you and say, fuck you. If you criticize, judge, and punish shoddy work and bad behavior, you're energetically, based on the law of attraction, supporting that negative behavior. You're giving unwanted behavior your attention and focus, which only creates and attracts more negative behavior. Where you should instead only give positive, wanted behavior your attention and your focus. So simply, as a teacher, you should praise good behavior and good work and pay no attention to bad behavior or bad work. Now, we got to explore the entire issue of good and bad, because not being interested in a subject and not liking being told what to do is not necessarily bad behavior. Calling it bad behavior is just pure subjective judgment. So, at least it should not be judged as being wrong or bad. That child or adult just isn't interested in that subject or that work. But what about disruptive behavior, resistant behavior? Well, first of all, it's your job as the teacher, guide, or boss or mentor to not create situations. That's right. You're supposed to not create negative situations where there seems to be a need to rebel against your oppressive authority. In other words, you create your own reality. That includes creating an environment in your class or workplace where your students or employees feel like they need to resist you because you're an asshole. My number one desire and pursuit in life has always been freedom. So naturally, as a child, teenager, and young adult, I rebelled against any teacher, parent, clergy, politician, or any other so-called authority figure who believed that they had the right and the authority to tell me how to think, believe, and act. So needless to say, I was the kid in the class who was always being disruptive and rebelling against teachers and getting thrown in the principal's office and thrown out of class, and then, of course, rebelling against, later in my life, asshole bosses who were asking unreasonable things, and, of course, always rebelling against religious authorities, asking questions like, and of course, teachers, well, what am I going to do with that? How does that help me? How can that be true? Etc. And, of course, unfortunately, rebelling against police. Because all of these supposed authorities were always telling me how to think, how to believe, and how to act. And, of course, I wanted the freedom to think, believe, and act as I please, because that is our natural state of being. The purpose of life is joy, and the basis of life is freedom, and we are free to create and be and do whatever we want. And future educational systems like the Sudbury approach will encourage freedom, not try to oppress and repress at all. It won't repress and repress freedom, especially, and creativity. Freedom of expression, thought, belief, perception, and action will be encouraged, not discouraged. So, how can we teach, guide, and support children and adults in positive, uplifting ways? Now, not waiting till the future when people have evolved. How can we do it now? For instance, what inspired this vodcast was a person I occasionally have to interact with in a certain situation. I won't, anyway. And she is someone who is not currently, in quote an official authority position, but has previously been a teacher in various capacities, including training children and so forth. But her approach is classically old school, judgy, criticize, to manipulate behavior. Her approach is very fear-based and aggressive. She justifies her aggressive, judgmental behavior as being safety-oriented to protect students from harm, and she assumes a very arrogant position that because of my experience as a teacher, well, you should automatically respect and honor my authority and do what I say. And the same pattern most old school teachers, bosses, clergy, politicians, and etc. assume. They demand respect even though they have not earned it or deserve it. At least not in your eyes, because you don't know them and don't know their experience. And because of their aggressive authoritarian approach, your natural reaction, like me, would be to resist and reject their demands and criticisms and judgments and their orders and supposed authority, because they have not proved to you that they deserve it, and of course their approach is not uplifting and not joyful in nature. If someone makes an educated, wise recommendation to me, I am open to hearing and applying that recommendation because it was given to me in a nice, supportive, non-judgmental, non-fear-based, non-arrogantly expressed way. But if you bark orders at me like you are an army sergeant and your demands are full of judgment, that if I don't follow your orders, I am an absolute idiot and will experience your wrath or general danger or some sort of cataclysm, which is just generally fear-based oriented. If your words are said with wisdom and loving support for my well-being and not words full of criticism and fear, well, then I'm going to listen and consider your advice. Otherwise, I am not. The key factor is fear. I don't resonate well with fear. In fact, none of us do. Trying to teach with fear is, as I have previously labeled, is absolutely barbaric in nature. And from a spiritual perspective, limitation and fear are illusions. So there's no way to try and help anybody. It is an old world, extremely faulty premise that if I can keep bad things away, I'll be safe and happy. If you're, beware all the time, there's a bad guy trying to get you. You can understand the logic of that approach with a dangerous sport where you are, doing something, potentially dangerous. And the logic is be safety conscious and you will be safe. In other words, imagine all of the bad things that can go wrong and act accordingly to keep bad things from happening. And that is a positive approach if done positively rather than fear-oriented. In other words, let's be safety consciousness so that good things always happen. Not let's be safety conscious and fearful to keep bad things from happening. And the latter was this person's approach. Her safety recommendations were full of fear, not positivity. Her critical, judgmental recommendations were, do this or you will die, and then we will all be inconvenienced with having to rescue your dead corpse, rather than being wise recommendations because we value your health and safety. We want you to be happy and healthy. So do you get my point? Old world teaching was focused on keeping bad things from happening, not oriented towards making good things happen. It was learn this, memorize this, believe this, do that, think this way, act this way, don't do that, don't do this, don't do that. Otherwise, you are a worthless piece of shit and you will be judged, condemned, punished, fired, spanked, rejected, etc. And we will cast you out of the cave to be eaten by the saber-toothed tigers. Not learn this, and it may help you and your life in this way and help you to be happy. Think and act this way, and you'll be happy, healthy, and prosperous. That is the approach that you should be taking. That was always my main question to teachers as I was wasting my valuable youth in school, getting crap that I was never going to use drilled into my head, which was, how is learning this going to help me in my life? Where and when am I going to use this in my life and career, teacher? And their response was always the same. They did not know because they were teachers, not, they weren't actually doing a job where they could apply that thing. Unless I became a rocket scientist, all that mathematics and science was a waste of my time. And what about history? Why do children need to know history? So they won't be assholes like their forefathers and kill indigenous populations and rape and pillage? Bullshit. Children don't need to be taught right from wrong. They don't need to be taught that what's moral and ethical. They don't need to be taught that murder is bad and stealing is bad. We were born pure, not sinful. We were born pursuing joy and goodness, not evil. No child needs to be taught that war and murder and thievery and lying are bad things. It's freaking obvious because those things don't feel good when you do them. Children are not idiots. They all were born being able to discern the difference between what feels good and what feels bad, which is our emotional guidance system, and how doing good things feels good and doing bad things feels bad. And of course, we should be encouraging children how to follow that emotional guidance system rather than drilling into them heads things like commandments and laws that if they do this, if they do this or don't do that, they're going to get thrown in prison. Unless someone is trying to usurp your freedom with fear-based demands and punishment, then it feels good to resist that authority and do bad things. Because anytime somebody is oppressing you, you feel helpless and powerless. You feel like a victim, so you want to resist them and control them and fight them and kill them. Because it feels more empowered to think that way and act that way. But that's only because resistance and defiance feels better than feeling disempowered and helpless to create your own freedom. And freedom is our next master key in this dissertation on education and guidance. The best way to teach is with freedom, not oppression and control. Oppression and control only creates disempowered slaves, criminals, and silently defiant peasants who are only doing what they are told because it's the path of the least pain and punishment, and are secretly aching to cut the heads off of their aristocracy. But when you teach with freedom, you raise self-empowered, happy, creative, inspired children who become happy and empowered adults. And the bonus is your students actually love, honor, and respect you, rather than them hating you and wanting to remove your head in the guillotine that they make in shop class because you're a judgmental, disempowering asshole. Now, I know what the teachers are saying. Hey, ZaKaiRan, I've got, what do I do? I've got 30 unruly, wild kids in my class that I've got to try and keep under control. Now, I did not say that your job was going to be easy. I wouldn't want to be a teacher of 30 kids. And of course, you are in a very frustrating position, especially because normal society would not agree with my, quote, empower the children with freedom approach, unquote. And you would probably lose your job for trying. And you probably won't have the freedom as a teacher to go 100% Sudbury and just encourage positive behavior and disregard negative behavior. But for sure, right now you can practice general positive influence where you reward positive behavior, but you do not punish negative behavior. You don't pay any attention to it whatsoever. It will not be easy to pay zero attention to shoddy work and unruly behavior and laziness and resistance behavior and only pay attention to positive behavior. But nevertheless, that is the master work and will ultimately pay off in immense quantities. And the more you do this, the more ruly your class will become, the more happy your class will become, and the less unruly it will become. And children will actually want to learn because they're having fun. That is the key ingredient. Children are not having fun in school, so they just want to say, fuck you, I want to do what I want. Because just like dogs, we want to please our teachers, and we want to be happy. We want to please other people because we want other people to be happy. Not at the expense of our own freedom and happiness. We don't want to have to do shit we don't want to do to make other people happy. The point here is it is not children and students' jobs to act in certain ways to make their parents and teachers and school boards happy. And similarly, later in life, it is not adults' jobs to act in certain ways to make lovers and parents and siblings and family and children and teachers and bosses and governments and clergy, etc. happy. This is something children understand before it is beaten out of them. That it is not their job to please their parents, siblings, family, friends, teachers, clergy, etc. It is their job in life to please themselves and have as much fun as possible. That's why it appears that children believe that the entire universe revolves around them. That's because they are right. It does. We all create our own universes. We are all creating our own realities, and the entire universe revolves around each one of us. So it is their job in life to have as much fun as possible, and they know that, and adults forget that. They have forgotten that it's also their job to have as much fun as possible. But this divinely selfish orientation of pleasing themselves is soon beaten out of them by their parents, siblings, teachers, lovers, bosses, etc. It soon becomes the path of least resistance then to try and be good and follow the rules and do what you're told to please others rather than one's own self. Not because you want to, not because it makes you happy, but because you just don't want to be punished. But enlightened education and teaching is where child students and adult students and humanity in general are given the freedom to think, believe, say, and do anything they like without our criticism and judgment. Did you hear that? Without our judgment and criticism. We are evolving this direction fast and furiously, luckily, as it is no longer societally approved behavior to judge other people for their religious, racial, sexual, gender, political, etc. beliefs and orientations. But of course, we still judge other people's behavior like crazy. And of course, there is much room for improvement still in those categories and the countless other behavioral categories that are still criticized, judged, and condemned, especially criminal behavior. But nevertheless, life in human society is gradually improving. But there is no time to wait for society to catch up and get their asses in gear. If you wait for society to change so that you can be happy, you're putting yourself in an extremely disempowering and frustrating position. A more empowering position to put yourself into is where you create what you want regardless of what society is doing. And you make yourself happy regardless of what shenanigans humanity gets up to that could frustrate the crap out of you. In other words, don't watch the news. And as a teacher, guide, mentor, or master, your happiness must be independent of what your students are doing or not doing. You got to get to a place where you care about your students' happiness and well-being, but you don't care if they follow your advice or do the assignments or apply themselves personally or not, because that is up to them, not you. You don't have any control over other people's behavior. Contrary to what society believes, they have no ability to control other people's behavior. They try as they might. Of course, that's what they try to do in the educational system and the workforce, etc., and government systems and religions. They try to control behavior, but of course, you really, really ultimately can't. You do not have any creative control over any other person, which includes, in this example, whether or not someone learns anything or not. That's up to them. Because contrary to old school control and punish-oriented educational systems, which implies that parents and teachers actually have control over their children's education, well, that is 100% a lie, because you cannot impose education upon anyone. No matter what punishment you impose upon them for not studying and applying themselves, it's really still up to the child whether they want to learn or not. Most students will go through the motions and act like they're interested to play the game and keep from getting criticized, judged, and punished. But the truth is, no one actually learns anything, and especially remembers what they were taught, unless they really want to learn. And they had fun learning. I emphasize had fun learning. If something is not fun, we immediately want to forget that crappy experience. And all children want to learn, but the big gaping flaw in the so-called educational system is society tries to teach children and later on adults things that they are not interested in for their own good, because we know better, which is bullshit. No child is bad at a subject. They are just not interested in that subject. And similarly, no adult is bad at a job or whatever the subject matter is. They're just not interested in that subject. Just not interested in that job. And forcing a child or an adult to learn or do something that they're not interested in and does not bring them joy is the same as enslaving a person to work in your cotton fields. It is the same as drafting a person to fight your war and kill people for you so that you can control territory and control resources, or employing someone to do a job that they hate doing just so you can make money off of their back. It's a shame that humans believe they must do unwanted, unlikable things to get things they want. That's just absolutely not the way to have fun and create what you want. They believe that because of the faulty premise we are taught that to get what you want, you must get rid of things you don't want. And this stems from the huge disempowering fault in the educational system where children are trained to be cogs in the wheel and not trained to be free spirits. We are not taught that we have the divine power and freedom to create anything we desire, that we, of course, focus our positive attention upon. We are not taught to pursue creative endeavors. Instead, we are taught to pursue employment in fields that are stable and guarantee a steady income, but do not necessarily guarantee any level of happiness and freedom. I have always been basically unemployable because I don't like anyone telling me what to do. And I value my freedom and creativity above all things. So I have always worked for myself and pursued more alternative self-employment, financial endeavors, and alternative businesses. I've always chosen happiness and freedom over a paycheck. But that does not mean that you can't have happiness and freedom with a steady paycheck. The point is, and it is the point I am always making, the optimal way to live, to be happy, healthy, prosperous, and fulfilled is get happy to attract happy things that match your happiness. And of course, that's what we should be encouraging our students and everyone to live, be, and do. It is not, contrary to what humanity believes, that when I get happy things, then I will be happy. That just leads to greed. The former is the pathway, the former being get happy to attract happy things, is the pathway to 100% self-empowerment and happiness and fulfillment. And, of course, abundance and getting whatever you want. But mostly being happy all the time. And the latter of when I get happy things, then I'll be happy, is the road to 100% disempowerment, which is the road that most humans are on. They are conditional livers, conditional lovers. They live their lives based on conditions, reacting to conditions, rather than creating internal conditions that attract and create good external conditions. A more empowered approach is get happy to attract happy, pleasing relationships and happy situations, such as pleasing jobs and businesses, etc., that are inspiring, creative, and supportive, and give me the freedom I desire. It is not empowering to settle for doing jobs and businesses that I don't like in order so that I can buy things that I do like so that I can be happy. That's when humans do unhappy jobs so that they can buy happy things and buy happy lives. But the major fault in that premise is you can't buy happiness. We've heard it a million times in a million songs. If you need things to make you happy, well, then you become greedy because you then always need more things and new things, like a junkie addicted to getting more shiny things to make you happy. And of course, the biggest fault in that focus is if you can't get more happy things, then you are unhappy. And being unhappy does not help you attract happy things. It only attracts more unhappy things. Point is, you can't get a happy result from an unhappy journey. And that is why happiness, well-being, prosperity, fulfillment, and freedom eludes most of humanity, because they are living lives backwards by trying to buy happy things and happy lives and happy relationships and happy jobs, businesses, and situations. So, I think I have banged my drum long enough for you to hopefully have gotten the point of how to teach others and ultimately how to teach yourself how to be self-empowered and be happy, conscious creators of joy, well-being, and abundance, which is your goal as a teacher, as well as your goal for your own life, which is to focus on what you want and pay no attention to what you don't want. So in regards to your students, lovers, friends, parents, co-workers, bosses, etc., you got to do the same thing. You got to focus on the positive behavior of those people. And focus on the likable behavior of people you like and pay no attention to the behavior that you don't like. You got to teach and live using praise and encouragement and recommendation and positive, uplifting support and generosity and unconditional love with a complete lack of judgment. Because first off, it will make you happy and empowered, but it will positively influence others to also be happy and empowered. Never, ever, 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 ever criticize and judge anyone's behavior as wrong, bad, or evil, no matter how horrendous their actions may seem to be. Do not try and control anyone with the fear and wrath of your criticism and judgment and your rejection and dishonor and disapproval, or your threats of punishment or your actual punishment. Never, ever, ever, ever. Never, ever demand that anyone does anything for you or anyone else to make you happy. Instead, make recommendations that are the pathways of least resistance, which is always the path of most allowance and most fun and most joy and most abundance and most caring and most supportive and most generous, etc. Pathways that are recommendations that are the path of most joy, fun, well-being, and fulfillment for that person, but not for you. Which is always the same recommendation of everyone's own source. Your own source is always guiding you in that same way. Your own source is always leading you and everyone to more joy and more love and more fun. Because your source is always guiding through vibration, not through words. Not through, go over there. Your source only just vibrates joy and fun. Over here is joy and fun. Go there. Say to your student or your friend, or even to yourself, I recommend that you do this because these are the possible positive consequences of doing it. And these are the possible consequences of not doing it. But either way that you decide, well, my general recommendation is always go down the path of most fun and most joy. And if you do that, you will always be in the right place at the right time with the right people doing the right things. And you will get what you truly want, which is always to be happy. Because the only reason anyone wants anything is because they believe it will make them happy. And above all things, divinely, selfishly pursue joy and feeling good above all things. Because the purpose of life is joy. The purpose of life is to make yourself happy, not make everyone else happy. It is your job to make you happy, not to make anyone else happy, because it is impossible to make anyone else happy, because you cannot control other people's behavior. It is not your job to control other people's behavior. It is impossible to control other people's behavior, because there is no such thing as assertion. There is only the law of attraction, and only you can create your own reality. So, instead of trying to control and manipulate external reality to get what you want so that you can be happy, get happy and basically control your internal reality so that you can attract and create a beautiful external reality. Very simple, very easy. So, I hope you've enjoyed my podcast, Teach with Praise, Encouragement, Love, and Recommendation, and it helps you guide yourself and other people towards a life of complete self-empowerment and freedom, where we are all empowered to create the joy, well-being, abundance, and freedom and fun that we all desire. If you did enjoy this, and of course you did because it was amazing, as my podcasts always are, please share it with your friends. Bless them and empower them with these amazing teachings. And please subscribe to my YouTube channel and my podcast channel, The Master Keys of Creation. Come visit me at ZaKaiRan.com for tons more self-empowering goodies to help you become a conscious, deliberate creator of reality. My name is ZaKaiRan, and I'm here to help you remember that you are an unlimited master of divine creation, and you have the power and freedom to create the joy, love, well-being, and abundance you desire. Thanks again for watching my video or listening to this podcast, and I wish you immense joy and abundance on your magnificent journey of divine creation. And of course, always remember to make life a holiday. Woohoo!